HOA Karen demanded my pool for her party, so I drained it, and she called the cops. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten her. I just smiled, nodded politely, and started draining my pool. That's when HOA Karen completely lost her mind and made the biggest mistake of her life by calling the police on my own property. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind that looks peaceful from the outside but hides a nest of power, hungry busybodies underneath. You know the type: perfect lawns, identical mailboxes, and an HOA board that thinks it's a government agency. And at the very center of it all was Karen. Karen wasn't just on the HOA board. Karen was the HOA board, at least in her head. She enforced rules that didn't exist, invented fines on the spot, and treated every homeowner like a misbehaving child. Most people tolerated her because fighting back took effort. I didn't tolerate her. That made me a problem. The pool was the final straw. My house backs up to a greenbelt, and years ago, before the HOA was formed, I had a private in-ground pool installed. Fully permitted, fully fenced, fully paid for. It was written clearly into the property records: private property, homeowner responsibility, no HOA access rights. Karen knew this, she just didn't care. One Tuesday afternoon, I heard aggressive knocking at my front door, not the friendly neighbor kind, but the "I demand your attention immediately" kind. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Karen stood there with her clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield, sunglasses perched aggressively on her face. "We need to talk about your pool," she said, skipping any form of greeting. I leaned casually against the doorframe. "Do we?" "Yes," she snapped. "The HOA is hosting a community summer party this weekend, and your pool is the most suitable venue." I blinked once. "I'm not hosting a party." She sighed dramatically, like I was slow. "You don't need to host it, you just need to allow access. HOA events take priority." That's when I realized something important. She wasn't asking, she was issuing an order. "I'm going to stop you right there," I said calmly. "My pool isn't HOA property." She flipped her clipboard around and tapped a page with her pen. Section 7. For communal enjoyment of amenities. I smiled. That section applies to HOA-owned amenities. My pool is not one of them. Her lips tightened. "You're being difficult." "No," I replied evenly, "I'm being accurate." She straightened her posture. "If you refuse, you may face penalties." "What penalties?" I asked. She hesitated just for a split second. "Exactly, I'll notify the board," she said, "and you'll be fined." "For what?" I asked, maintaining my own property. She ignored the question and turned on her heel, muttering about noncompliance, as she marched away. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next 2 days, I received 3 emails, 2 printed notices, and 1 handwritten note taped to my mailbox, all demanding access to my pool. Each message escalated in tone. By the last one, Karen had declared that the HOA would be assuming temporary control of the pool for community use. That's when I decided to comply, maliciously. You see, Karen had one fatal weakness. She loved rules, but she didn't understand them, so I did exactly what the rules allowed. Early Thursday morning, I walked into my backyard, opened the pool's drain valve, and watched the water level begin to drop. Slowly, legally, beautifully, I documented everything: photos, time stamps, maintenance logs. By noon, the pool was visibly lower. By evening, it was unmistakable. And by Friday morning, the day before her precious party, Karen arrived. She froze the moment she saw it. "What did you do?" she shrieked. I looked genuinely puzzled. "Maintenance. You can't do this," she yelled. "Actually," I said calmly, "I can, and I am." She marched toward the pool, heels clicking angrily, staring into the half-empty basin like it had personally betrayed her. "This is sabotage," she snapped. "No," I corrected gently, "this is ownership." Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the cops." I nodded. "Please do." That single sentence broke her, because she was so used to people backing down, and I wasn't. She stormed off, dialing furiously, loudly telling the dispatcher how I was destroying community property. I sat down on my patio chair, poured myself a drink, and waited, because I knew something Karen didn't. Calling the police on a man who knows the law on his own property is never a good idea, and this was only the beginning. The police arrived faster than I expected. 2 cruisers rolled into the cul-de-sac, lights off but unmistakable. Karen was already pacing at the edge of my driveway, phone still in her hand, like she was afraid reality might escape if she let go of it. She rushed the officers the moment they stepped out. "He's vandalizing HOA property," she said breathlessly. "He drained the community pool right before an approved event." I stayed seated. That detail matters. I didn't rush, I didn't interrupt, I didn't defend myself prematurely. I let her talk because people like Karen always expose themselves when you give them enough rope. One officer finally raised a hand. "Ma'am, slow down, which pool?" She spun and pointed dramatically. "That one." The officer looked where she was pointing, then looked at me, then back at her. "Is that pool owned by the HOA? "Yes," she snapped. "It's used by the community." "That's not what I asked," he replied. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Well, it should be." The second officer raised an eyebrow. I stood up calmly and walked over, holding a thin folder. "Afternoon, officers," I said. "I'm the homeowner. This is my private pool. Here are the property records, permits, and maintenance logs." I handed over the folder. Karen's face changed instantly. "No, no, no," she said sharply. "He's lying. The HOA has authority." The officer flipped through the documents slowly, too slowly for her comfort. "Ma'am," he said finally, "these records show this pool was built before the HOA existed. It's fenced, permitted, and listed as private property." Karen crossed her arms. "That doesn't matter." "It actually matters a lot," he replied. She laughed nervously. "He's draining it on purpose to sabotage a community event." I nodded. "Correct. But the event isn't on my property, and I'm under no obligation to provide amenities I own." The officer looked at her. "Did the HOA issue a written order requiring access?" "Yes," she said quickly. "Can I see it?" She hesitated. Then she pulled out her clipboard and flipped through papers far too fast. "I don't have it on me." The officer sighed. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "even if such an order existed, the HOA cannot compel a homeowner to provide private property for use unless it's explicitly written into the deed or bylaws." Karen's voice rose. "Then what is the HOA even for?" The officer blinked. "That's not a police question." Her entire posture collapsed in on itself, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "So you're just going to let him ruin the party?" "I'm going to let him maintain his pool," the officer said flatly. Karen turned to me. "You think you've won." I met her eyes. "I think you shouldn't have called the cops." The officers left shortly after, clearly done with the situation. One of them even paused as he walked past me. "You did everything right," he said quietly. Karen heard that, and it broke something in her. That afternoon, the emails started again, angrier this time. She threatened fines, then liens, then legal consequences. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something far more devastating. I forwarded everything, every email, every notice, every threat, straight to the HOA legal counsel. You see, Karen assumed I was just another neighbor she could intimidate. She didn't realize I read bylaws for fun. By evening, neighbors started stopping by. One asked quietly, "Did she really call the cops on you?" "Yep." Another shook his head. "She's out of control." The next morning, the day of the party, I woke up to chaos. Cars lined the street, decorations were being unloaded, a bounce house was inflating. In the common area far from my pool, Karen stood in the center of it all, barking orders like a general who'd lost the war but refused to admit it. Then she saw the pool, still drained. She marched over again, this time with several board members in tow. "You embarrassed me," she hissed. I smiled politely. "You did that yourself." One board member cleared his throat. "Karen, the attorney says." "I know what the attorney says." She snapped. He flinched. She turned back to me. "You could have just cooperated and reward behavior like this." I asked calmly. "No." She leaned closer. "You think this ends here?" I leaned closer too, still calm, still quiet. "It already did." That's when one of the board members spoke up. "We're voting to remove you as event coordinator," he said. Her head snapped toward him. "What?" And possibly from the board. Another added. The silence was brutal. Neighbors were watching now. Phones were out. Karen looked around, realizing too late that her authority had evaporated. The party fizzled. Guests left early. Decorations came down, and my pool, still empty, still mine. Karen didn't look at me as she walked away. She didn't have to, because everyone else was. Karen didn't speak to me for 3 days after the party collapsed. That alone told me everything I needed to know. People like her don't go quiet unless something is happening behind the scenes, something they can't control. And sure enough, on the 4th day, the consequences arrived. It started with an email from the HOA board, not from Karen. That detail mattered. The subject line read, "Clarification regarding private property and recent conduct." I already knew what it meant. The message was polite, almost apologetic. They confirmed in writing that my pool was never HOA property, that Karen had exceeded her authority, and that no future requests for access would be made. They also regretted any inconvenience caused by miscommunication, That's what they were calling harassment, false threats, and calling the police under false pretenses, but I didn't need the apology. I already had the victory. That evening, Karen showed up again. No clipboard, no entourage, no sunglasses, just her. She stood at the edge of my driveway like someone approaching a courtroom instead of a house. "I want to talk," she said quietly. "I didn't invite her in. We talked right there in full view of the neighborhood. You went behind my back." She said, "No." I replied calmly, "I went through proper channels. You made me look stupid." "No," I corrected. "You did that yourself." She clenched her jaw. The board voted. I waited. "They removed me as event coordinator," she said, "and they're reviewing my position." I nodded. "That's unfortunate." She looked up sharply. "Don't patronize me. I'm not." I said, "I warned you multiple times." Her voice dropped. "You could have just let us use the pool. And you could have asked." I replied. "Instead, you threatened me." She stared at the ground. I didn't think you'd push back. That was the most honest thing she'd said all week. I always push back. I said, "I just do it quietly." She swallowed. "Are you satisfied?" I thought about it, about the emails. "The threats, the cops, the lies, yes." I said, "I am." She left without another word. The fallout didn't stop there. Over the next month, Karen stopped attending HOA meetings. Then her name disappeared from the board roster. Then new bylaws were circulated, very specific ones about harassment, misuse of authority, and false reports to law enforcement. Everyone knew why. No one said it out loud, and I refilled the pool. Slowly, methodically, with receipts. The first time I swam again, a neighbor leaned over the fence and said, "Guess Karen didn't win that one." I smiled. She never had a chance. Here's the thing people don't understand about malicious compliance. It isn't loud. It isn't reckless. It doesn't break rules. It uses them. Karen believed authority meant power. I proved that knowledge does. She thought intimidation would make me fold. Instead, it documented her downfall. She thought calling the cops would scare me. Instead, it created witnesses. And in the end, she didn't lose because I attacked her. She lost because I let her overreach and made sure everyone saw it. My pool remains private. My property remains mine, and Karen, she still lives in the neighborhood. She just avoids my street now, which, honestly, is the best possible ending. Because every time the water shimmers in my backyard, it reminds me of one simple truth. You don't have to raise your voice to win. You just have to know your rights and let entitlement destroy itself.